Welcome back, everybody, to MACNA 2020 Phoenix Rising. I'm Kevin Erickson. I'm now honored to introduce Mark Callahan. There's a central theme of Mark's life: water, water, water. Growing up in Tennessee meant trips to the local lakes and rivers on the family ski boat. Spring break was always spent in Hawaii, cruising the reefs and forever ingraining memories of the beauty of the ocean in his mind. Mark's first fish tank was a typical goldfish bowl: 1 gallon of water, some multicolored gravel on the bottom, a plastic plant, and 1 fish. Here to talk about good to great, taking your saltwater tank to the 1%, is Mark Callahan. Welcome to MACNA 2020 Phoenix Rising, Mark.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks, everyone, for being quote unquote together in these unprecedented times. I wish we could be all together in Phoenix in the desert cooking, but being together, enjoying each other's camaraderie, as well as learning lots of great things together. However, that's not the case this year. I want to give a special shout out to Kevin and the whole MACNA crew for adapting to the COVID situation and what's going on, not giving up, and putting together a virtual presentation. So thank you guys and gals for doing what you had to do to make this happy. I hope everyone is staying healthy and enjoying your tanks while you're at home and taking care of yourself. So as Kevin explained, my name is Mark Callahan, also known as Mr. Saltwater Tank. I got started in the saltwater tank hobby in 1989. This is me and dear old dad. I came down the stairs. That's how we did Christmas. We had a 2-story house. My brother and I would sit on the stairs. My parents would go downstairs, probably to caffeinate themselves, because we would get up at 4 or 5 a.m. And then they said, okay, you can come downstairs, and there's always wrapped gifts, but then there are always surprise gifts. And in 1989, my dad surprised me with my first saltwater tank. And here it is. For those of you that have been in the hobby for a while, this probably looks familiar. The oak trimmed oceanic tank with the under gravel filter, a book to learn about what you're doing, because there was no internet back then. Those of you who are younger, you may not be able to fathom a life without the internet, but you actually had to get a book and read it, and then you go to your local fish store and ask them. So there's the VHO fluorescent T12 tube in there as well. So the first tank was at 75, which was not bad. Just keep in mind, in 1989, pretty much no one could keep coral. It was fish and fake rock, which was really coral skeletons that either died, and then once a month you would bleach them, because how cool you were was how white your rock was. And so literally once a month my dad and I would take the big coral skeletons out. There was no live rock. Take them out, put them in a bucket with dilute bleach, wait till they turn white, which is about a minute, rinse them off, put some Fritz guard on there to knock off the bleach, then put it back in the tank. We couldn't figure out why the tank kept crashing. That's kind of how we did things back then. So fast forward about 20 years, and my wife got me a freshwater tank as a birthday gift, and I said, do you still have the receipt? Because I'm going to take it back and make it a saltwater tank, which I did, and then built that out and decided one day, since I hated the job I was in, I had a video camera, I liked being on camera, and had a saltwater tank. Let's go start making videos on YouTube. So in about 10 years ago now, 10 and a half years, started Mr. Saltwater Tank TV, which was just me in a 90-gallon tank talking on camera. And that grew to sponsorships, and then I wrote books. And then one day someone said, hey, I want you to build me a saltwater tank. This was the first saltwater tank that I built in Austin, Texas. Go hook 'em horns. Sorry for your Aggie fans out there, but hey, got to stay loyal to the University of Texas. So this was the first tank that I was actually paid to produce. It's a 220-gallon tank, mixed reef, which was a lot of fun, and learned a lot along the way. Kind of transitioned over the past couple of years really to just building tanks, custom projects for people. And then in the past year and a half, I started taking over video roles again over at saltwateraquarium.com, running their video channel, trying to crank out information on all various types of topics. So along the way, of course, I had some tanks for myself, and you all have caught me at an interesting time. If you hear any banging in the background, it's because they're putting siding up back on my house, because yesterday, this is what my house looked like. We took a window out, we cut a hole in the side, we brought in a big 25-ton crane, and we lifted up my new 1,000-gallon aquarium into the house. The neighbors probably looked at me like, who is this guy? Of course, if you're a saltwater aquarium hobbyist, what I call reef junkies, this is normal day stuff. Like, yeah, just take out the window, rip a hole inside the house, and crane in a tank. Why not? What's wrong with that? And clearly, if you're doing that, or you're considering doing that realistically without getting divorced, you're looking to have your tank be really great. Maybe you have a tank that's doing okay or doing good, and you want to take it to the next step. Or you're saying, you know what, I want to get into the saltwater tank hobby. If I do this, I'm going all in. I'm not going to mess around with this thing. I might not crane in a 1,000-gallon tank at first, but I'm going to dig my heels in, and I'm going to do this right. So going from good to great, we have to first start with what's good? What makes a quote unquote, quote, good saltwater tank? Now, I don't want to say sad, because the truth is most saltwater tanks are reef tanks. That's a tank, saltwater tank with coral. There's not many fish-only tanks anymore. There are some, and if you're a fish-only person, I'm actually going to talk about those and show you some in this presentation. But most of you, I'm going to say 98% at least watching this presentation, have a reef tank. And so, we're talking about reef tanks. Now, the owners also they're all in. They care about their tank. They're not always switching methods or getting stuck on the latest YouTube trend. They know what they want to do with their tank. They've chosen what works for them, and they say, this is the route that I'm going on. So my father always told me, skipper, hold your course, pick a route, I always tell people, and go down that route. And most quote unquote good saltwater tanks are at least 6 months old. Now this is, it's not like when you get to 6 months, that means your tank is good. I found that after 6 months, those tanks have started to break in. They're starting to come into themselves. The owner, if they're a newbie, has made those newbie mistakes. They're starting to work through these, and you're still in the game. Which someone told me once, that what makes a great saltwater tank hobbyist from a good one is how many times the tank has melted down and you moved on. Now, the good news is these days, we don't have to do that very much. Your tank really shouldn't crash, shouldn't melt down, because we have great resources such as the internet, as well as conferences like this, where you can actually learn from someone who's got the chops to back it up. So at 6 months, you've probably gone through those beginner steps. Your tank is starting to break in. You're getting used to it. Okay, so now that we have good established, what does great look like? Because I imagine that most of you that are watching this presentation aren't just here to say, I've got a good saltwater tank. That's good enough for me. You're here to make it great. So what is great? What is the 1% of reefers? Now, remember, if you're a fish-only person, this includes you as well, but that upper echelon, really the top of things. Well, usually when we hear 1%, we think about it as the 1%ers, the people that have so much money, they can throw money down the black hole and their bank accounts aren't going to notice. Now, some people would say that's what you have to do to have a saltwater tank, which I think is horrendous advice. It doesn't have to be that way. But I'm not talking about money, a crazy life where you have your own jet, you have your own supercar. I'm not talking about that. We're talking about reef tanks. What is going to make your tank get into that 1%? Now, keep this in mind. That's objective. What I consider a great reef tank isn't going to be what Kevin thinks is a great reef tank, or any of you watching the reef tank. All this is objective. Its beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But there's just tanks that you look at, no matter what your taste. You can look at them if it's a great tank and you're like, maybe I don't know what it is about this tank, but there's something just really about it. That's a great tank. I can appreciate it, even if it's not quite your thing. For example, I'm not really into architecture, but I can look at a Frank Lloyd Wright like this one, this is falling water in Pennsylvania, and go, that's beautiful. That is a fantastic piece of architecture. I'm probably not going to forget this. If someone asks me about that, I'm going to know it by name, because, again, I'm not an architect person, but I can look at that and go, wow, that's remarkable. Likewise, I'm not an art person either, but I can look at Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night and go, that's different and that's phenomenal. That's something that I'm not going to forget. You can put that up if you've seen it once. You're going to know what it is because it's great. It's in that 1% of that architecture or that art. Whatever it is, it's really that upper echelon. So my point of view is I put aquatic canvases in clients' houses, their offices, their locations, and I help them create really aquatic art. And I'm in a unique situation from other tank builders because I don't service tanks. Most of my clients, in fact, all but one, are not in the Nashville, Tennessee area where I live. They're spread out over the nation. I build the tank and then I say, here you go. I'm going to help you with this thing, but I'm not there every day. It's not the 1%ers, people who say, I want a solar tank, but I don't want to touch it. So that's where I'm coming from when I think about a great reef tank. And yes, again, we're talking about reefs, and I am going to talk about fish-only tanks for those of you that are into your fish and not corals, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. If we're here giving a presentation in person, I would ask how many people in the room are fish only people. And there'd probably be 2 people in the back, in the corner, sitting right next to one another, like slowly raising their hand, waiting for like the assault to come onto them. I don't know why, but that's usually how it's how it always works out. So, great reef tanks. There's a couple different facets, and one of them is hardware. Now, some of you are likely rolling your eyes like, great. It's going to talk about tech stuff. Yes and no, because automation does make your reef tank easier, but it's not everything. And there's some certain facets of it that have to be there for me to make it great in my mind. Just because you put gadgets on the tank doesn't mean that it's great. It doesn't give you an immediate ticket that, yeah, your tank is great, but it helps you get there. Why? Because automation helps get the mundane and sometimes vital tank tasks out of the way. What does that look like? Dosing is the big one. I mean, dosing, automating your dosing makes complete sense to me. We always hear the saltwater tanks, it's all about stability. The more stable it is, the better the tank is. So if you're not dosing your tank with 20 to 200, maybe some tanks, 1,000 milliliters of solution once a day, sending your levels up high, then letting them fall back over 24 hours so you dose it again, you can level that out, flatten the curve, to use a timely term. That's a great thing. Makes your tank more stable, and it gives you time to do not only other things in your life, but if you want to spend time with your tank, you don't have to do that task. Now, some of you might say, well, I like dosing, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm saying you can automate it, make your tank more stable. You're going to get more enjoyment out of it because it looks better. And then you can spend more time, quality time in your tank, enjoying it. And if you still want to fiddle, that's fine, but I'm just changing what you're doing with your time with the tank. Not taking it away, just changing it. Water changes. Back in the day with my dad, when I had my saltwater tank, we would do a once a week, 50-gallon water change. We would mix up we actually take the 5-gallon bucket into the tub next door, fill it up with tap water, put in some dechlor, mix some salt up, instant ocean, mix it up with the plastic Python vacuum cleaner thing, get out our hydrometer and go, yeah, that looks good, and we dump it back in the tank. Did it work? Kind of, but not real great. So automating your water changes, again, flattening the curve, keeping your tank parameters very stable. Okay? However, I've been talking about tech things. You can automate that with automation. Tech has to complement the system by staying in the background. Now, let me set this up. I'm a bit of a tech person. I like my phones. I like using the computer. I have controllers on all my tanks and my clients' tanks. I like that. However, I don't want to look at a tank and go, oh, here's the tank. Wow, look at all this tech they have around this. Look at these blinking lights. Look at those cords. That's not why we got into the saltwater tank hobby. You got into the saltwater tank hobby to enjoy this. Now, there's a fair amount of tech going on in this system, and you can't see it. In fact, the only tech you can really see in here is the vortex, the internal pumps that are going on, and that's it. The tech should complement the system. It should make this look great, make this view look great, but then it should get out of the way. Now, sometimes that's easier said than done, especially for those of you that have a fish room. There's tech here, and you need to see it. You need to see the controller, you need to see the displays. There's going to be some cords. You just can't get away from that. It's not bad. It should be visible, but again, it should complement the system. And for me, filtration is part of a great reef tank. It doesn't mean you have to have all the expensive gear, all the bells and whistles, but it does mean filtration that's been thought out, that's functional, like this one here. At the end of the day, though, the automation has to get out of the way, give you more quality time with your tank, so you have the choice about what you want to do with the tank. You want to fiddle, you can do it. If you just want to sit back, you can do it. If you want to reprogram your automation, the point is you can do that because you have time, because everything else is handled in the background. All right. Also, when it comes to hardware, backups. Hobbyists, they're not willing to throw caution to the wind or leave it to chance. This is something I see with great tanks. True story, in Austin, Texas, when I first got started back in the saltwater tank hobby, I had no money. I was the guy who would jump on Craigslist, there wasn't Facebook back then, and I would find people that were tearing down their saltwater tanks, and I would try to be there first to get the stuff and bargain hard with them because they didn't have any money. Nothing wrong with that. The point was, I went to this guy's house and he had a beautiful reef tank. It had been set up for probably 5 to 10 years. fully grown out, and had clownfish that had sea anemones in it. And I said, okay, I'm going to come back next week and buy some stuff from you. I went back and he's like, oh, it all died. And I was like, what do you mean it all died? The system's been up for like 5 to 10 years. What did you do? And he's like, oh, we had a power outage for 4 days and I don't have a generator, so everything just died. And he was like nonchalant about it. And I was like, you have this beautiful reef tank. You don't even have like a small generator in the garage that you could hook up to at least power the return pump. Like, if nothing else, man, like get a power inverter for your pickup truck, because that's what everyone drives in Texas. Bigger is better, right? Everything's bigger in Texas. And like run something, like do something, man. However, he was just like, yeah, it didn't work out. And I was like, you just took this great reef tank and destroyed it. So the owners, they're not willing to just leave it to chance. At the end of the day, the owner knows that they're the stewards of the animal in the tank. You're in charge of the life of what's in there. You put it in there, and they don't take that lightly, and I don't believe that you should either. Now, backups can come in many forms, can be hardware, or it can simply be a clear backup plan. I'm actually getting a whole house generator put in my house right now, so that if something goes wrong with my new tank, I am covered and everything is handled. Now, even if you have a small generator, which is what I used to have, a wheelie one, wheel it out, hook it up in the garage, having some kind of backup plan. Again, it can be something as simple as plugging a power inverter to your car and running the return pump for an hour. Okay, I admit that it isn't necessarily the most green thing in the world to idle your car, to run the alternator in the car to power that pump, but we're keeping life alive in the short term until they get the power back on. So there's a plan. A great reef tank has a backup plan. The owner knows they're going to do something if something goes wrong. Part of that plan and part of them building a reef tank when it comes to hardware, even with the automation, is the owner has a clear focus on quality. You know, they talk about price people, and then there's quality people. You have to be kind of there's some sliding range on where you are in one. You can't be all about cheap and then want the best quality. I found great reef tank owners, they focus on brands that they can have a relationship with. Now, what does that mean? These are brands that they can actually access someone to get customer service. This beyond just email or just sending a message on Facebook and waiting for some bot to answer you. On one level, that's okay. You know, sometimes you expect that. For example, I had a 900-pound shipment of rock that UPS freight lost. How you lose that, I don't know, but they lost it. So I got on their website. Of course, they don't give you the phone number anymore. And you type into the little chat box, which is nothing more than a bot. You say, hey, freight lost. And they're like, oh, give us your tracking number. And I put it in, they're like, we're working on it. And you're just stuck. People who have great reef tanks are focusing on brands so they can get in touch with someone beyond just email. I'm not saying that you can immediately pick up the phone and get someone. Maybe you can, which is great. But there's something about that brand. They give you some way to get a hold of them beyond just sending an email, talking to some bot, and then leaving caution to the wind. Also, brands that are frequently visible. This coincides with brands that give back to the hobby. They're brands that are constantly cranking out information, wanting to teach you about things and make your tank better. And also brands that are giving back to the hobby, not only putting out good information, but supporting organizations like MACNA, those scholarship programs, things that are going to give back to the hobby because they actually care. They're not just here to make all the money in this industry and then get the hell out. Now, this doesn't mean you have to spend all the money in the world. It doesn't mean you have to buy the most expensive brands, but you focus on brands that actually care. There's actually a connection with that brand. All right. You got to have a saltwater tank to have a great saltwater tank. And when it comes to that install, that build, they're clean. The plumbing design reflects the client's dedication to their tank. Now, let me pause for a minute, because when people see this, they think, oh, well, he's going to dog on soft plumbing. I personally like hard plumbing. There's nothing wrong with soft plumbing. You can have clean installs with soft plumbing and make it look great and show that you actually care. Things like putting hose clamps on things, pushing it all the way down onto the bar fitting, stuff that you go, you know what, this person took an extra time, they care about it, they want to do it right. If you're doing hard plumbing things, they do things that make a difference. They rotate the printing on the pipes away so that you can't see them, so you're left with, in my mind, the beauty of the install of pipes. Actually, like, you can sit there and look at plumbing on a wall and go, "Ooh, that's pretty." Same type of attention to detail that is when it comes down to the plumbing. Cords don't take away from the presentation of the tank. You're going to have cords around a saltwater tank. It's going to happen. However, I've seen really good looking reef tanks and it's like, oh, what's all this gear around it? And I'm like, I'm stuck all of a sudden looking at the gear and it's pulling me away from the tank. So the cords are handled so that you're just left with the tank. There's also no loose ends on the tank. Dosing lines. I have made the mistake. I've seen plenty of people make the mistake. They hook up their dosing pump, the soft end of the tube, they just hang it over their sump. Maybe they put enough in that it's underwater and they leave it. And then it falls out and then it doses whatever you're dosing on the floor. Hopefully you find it before your wife or your partner does and gets upset. Then your tank levels change, things get thrown off. So those cords, those dosing lines are always secured. They're zip tied off, they're clamped off, whatever it is. We're taking away the game of chance when it comes to the tank. Drip loops around cords. Shocking, electricity plus water equals a shock. That's not good. You don't want that. Taking an extra moment to put in a drip loop. Now, some of you are going to say, Mark, I'm not going and looking at someone's tank and then popping the lid and having to look underneath there and going, wow, drip loops. Great reef tank. No, maybe you're not. However, if I'm looking at a tank and I see that, it's like, oh, this person cares. This person took a minute and actually slowed down and did this right. Little subtle signs that stick out at me. Now, those that are not gearheads, you're in luck. Livestock. I'm willing to bet with 99.9% certainty that you got into the saltwater tank hobby because you either saw coral or you saw fish and you're like, I want that. You're one of the people who are like, ooh, look at all this gear around this tank. I want all that gear, so I'm going to get a tank. If that's you, send me an email. I'd love to hear about it. You would be the first, so then I can put my foot in my mouth in this talk. But I'm willing to bet that you got into it because you wanted some kind of livestock in your tank. That's what happened to me. I walked into the pet store in 1989. I saw a yellow tang, and I went, wow, that's beautiful. My father, who was a good listener, heard that, and then next thing you know, as I said, Christmas Day, the tank showed up. Now, think about livestock, and I'm going to start with fish. If you're a coral person, hang on. I'm going to be with you in just a minute. A lot of people think, oh, a great reef tank's got tons of fish in it. You know what? That doesn't excite me. Taking a tank and jamming in a whole bunch of fish is like, okay, all right. I mean, to me, it doesn't show much of anything other than you're willing to throw a bunch of money at fish, put probably too many of them in a little aquatic box, and hope that it does okay. A good saltwater tank has a strategy with their fish. Now, you fish-only people, if you've tuned out, now's the time to tune back in. Here is a fish-only tank, which I think is really, really great. Now, this is in a basement of someone's house. Notice that there are some fish in here. There's not tons, but there's a healthy amount of fish. Again, this is a fish-only tank. It's not a reef tank, so a fish-only tank can be great. There are plenty of showstoppers in this tank, and there's some quote-unquote bread and butter fish. Okay, so let's have a look at one of these showstoppers. This is a wrought iron butterfly. A beautiful fish. Sorry, you reefy guys, not for you. I would love to destroy your coral. Very, very beautiful animal. This is a great specimen as well. You can stare at this fish all day long. You don't see that very often, so that's one of the things that makes it great. Then they have another, this is another angel. This is a clarion angel. This guy really didn't like me filming him, but he was here. There's the queen taking over in the back. There's the wrought iron again. But again, these are, if you're an angelfish person, if you're a fish person at all, and here's the emperor stealing the show as well. These are great fish. Emperor is more common, clarion is more rare, but here's a show size emperor angel, and it's a very healthy animal. There's no head and lateral line. This tank is very clean. You can tell this owner cares about their tank. So fish-only tanks can be showstoppers as well. I want to back up here and just show you, again, this tank isn't stuffed. I wouldn't consider this a healthy amount of fish in the tank, but if this owner put in twice as many fish, be like, okay, like you have some really great fish in here, which we saw, and some other ones like that can stick angel back there. It's like, but then you just decided to just cram stuff in. Like, where's the thrust of this? Like, I don't know if you're an angelfish guy or an atheist guy, all you did was just cram a bunch of fish in there. So there's some strategy to stocking that fish only tank. And reef tanks, yes, they're included in this as well. Yes, the coral part, but I'm focusing on the fish part. This is a very famous tank in Utah. There's lots of great looking coral in here. And there's 3 fish in here that are catching my eye. The pyramid butterfly is over there on the right. Let me zoom in here so you can see. These guys, these to me steal the show. Why? Because there's 3 of them, which you don't see that a lot in saltwater tanks. I like to see pairs, trios, schools of fish. So there's 3 of these guys. They're all very healthy. They look really great. There also have some great colors on them. Here's a shot from my friends in Cairns Marine in Australia. These are some that they just collected. These guys steal the show. They look phenomenal. Again, why do they steal the show in this reef tank? Because there's 3 of them, and that's something unique that's standing out of me. However, if you're a fish person, you're noticing something else in that picture right there in the center, the black and white guy. If you don't know what that is, what is that? That is a banded angelfish. That is a rare saltwater fish collected at the depths. Comes from Hawaii, which is a phenomenal fish. You don't see it that often. If you're paying attention, it was actually in that fish only tank I just showed you. Great animal. Here's a shot of one that I picked up for a client. This is a rare fish. You don't see it very often because it's collected at such depth, and it commands a higher price tag. So there are fish in there that not only pairs of them catch my eye, but also rare fish in there. Fish that fit the tank, to me, are more impressive than big or many fish. I am a big fan of buying a small fish and then letting it grow to the tank. I have seen this in my own tanks. If you followed me for any amount of time, you know that I had my 90, then I moved to Tennessee, and I had a 225, and then a year later, I moved, actually about pretty much around the corner, and got a 375, and then we moved again a year later and got my 450, which was up for a while, and just recently tore that down into my 1,000-gallon tank. So I have seen fish, and I'll talk about this, I'll show you an example in a minute, that I buy small, because I like to buy them small, and then I watch them grow to a tank. And then when they got to the next size tank, they grew some more, and then they stopped. So I'd be happier with the tank that has the small fish that were put in there small and it grew to the tank. Back to the banded angel. This is a rare fish, and it's rare also that it's small. This guy was about 2 inches, 2 to 2.5 inches that I picked up for a client. They had large ones there, but I said, you want that guy right there. Rare fish that looks great, it's healthy, and it's small. So it's going to grow to your size of tank and then be comfortable. We're not trying to take this big fish, cram it in a small box, and go, okay, deal with it. Now, I talked about the fish growing to the tank size. This I saw with my blonde Naso tang, a Naso elegans, for those of you that know your scientific names. I got this fish about 2 inches across. Now it's in the tank behind me. She's right there. It's about 5 to 6. And I'm curious to see if she grows again once I put her in my 1,000-gallon tank. She was in my 450, which was 8 feet long. She got to about this size, and she's been that size for about 3 or 4 years now. She hasn't grown much at all since then. So I'll be curious to see if she jumps up in size again once she gets to the new tank. So when I see a fish that is the right size for the tank, it tells me 2 things. One, either that owner understands getting the right size fish for the tank, or they have patience and insight, and they bought the small fish, and they said, here you go, let's let you grow into this tank, and then stop. So the owner is willing to be part of the process. They're not just looking for the end result. They understand that end result takes time. There's some path along the way. And I've also found that really great reef tanks have fish with a story. The owner can often look at a fish and tell you about them. For example, my blonde Naso tang. I've had this fish for, let's see, 8 years now. I got this fish after I made the mistake of not quarantining, and my fish got marine velvet, and everything but 2 fish in that tank died. Not a lot of fun to go on YouTube and go, hey, pretty much everything in my brand new tank is dead because I messed up, and I'm just going to start over. The good news is I learned my lesson from that. If you don't quarantine your animals, I hope you learn from my mistake and start quarantining them. However, she's with me because I got her after that process. I quarantined her, and she reminds me, if you quarantine properly and you take care of your fish, I don't have to go through that mistake again. She's happy, she's healthy, hanging out in the tank behind me. So there's a story with her. There's a story with other fish in my tank as well. Don't have the time to run through all of them with you. But I found that great tanks, the owner has some relationship with their fish. It may not be all the fish, but some amount of fish in the tank. They know where they got them. They know why they got them. They have some kind of relationship with the fish in their tank. All right, let's talk about the stuff that doesn't move. When you likely first got in the saltwater tank hobby, you're like, wait, what? You want me to pay $100 for a half inch of that stuff and it just sits there? Now, if you're not an SPS person, hang with me because I'm talking to you as well. I remember the first time I saw a nice looking zoanthid and I was like, you want 25 bucks for one polyp? And it just sits there. Yeah, it moves a little bit, but it's like, whatever. I'm going to stick to my fish. But we're talking about reef tanks. Those are tanks that have coral in them. I have found the 1% of reef tanks that I consider great. They're mixed reefs, and they show a lot of patience, and they show a whole bunch of strategy. Mixed reef being all different types. If you're a softy person, here you go. Zoanthids, this is my first love when it comes to coral. This is a zoanthid garden. We have them right next to one another. If you like to have corals next to one another without fighting, this is a great coral with which to do it. The owner is willing to mix it up, not only with types of one type of coral, but also different types of coral. LPS, SPS, all those things. Now, if you're a stickhead, I'm talking to you specifically at this point, I have found that great reef tanks, that 1% of reef tanks, when it comes to SPS, it's not so much about growth with me. Because anyone can buy a big SPS colony and put it in their tank, and I can look at it now and go, okay, that looks unnatural. You clearly bought this colony. If that's your thing, great. But I'm more impressed by a small frag that's grown out that looks like it's part of the tank because it was started small. That's one marker for me. The other one is colors. Intense colors, multicolors when you can get it out of a coral. For example, this is a piece of maricultured acro. One of my old tanks, we've got purples, we've got teals, we've got greens. And I see this in a reef tank, especially when it comes to colors on SPS. Now I'm really paying attention to that tank because I know this person has the thing dialed in. Now, if you're looking to get your tank up to that 1%, you're like, okay, I'm going to go chase some SPS color. A bit of bad news, color is the hardest thing to obtain and the easiest thing to lose and the hardest thing to get back. So if you want to chase that, by all means, go for it. There's great information out there about it. Just know you're chasing that 1%. You're going after that top 1 percentile. That's a lot harder to obtain. If you're willing to put in the effort, you can get there. If I can get there, you can get there. Other great looking acros, this is all maricultured stuff, so don't let anyone tell you that mariculture don't live. That's simply not true. And when it comes to SPS, when I'm looking at a reef tank, I like to see reef tanks that have some legacy corals. If you've been around the saltwater tank hobby long enough and you're a stickhead, you can look at this and go, that's pink lemonade. Yeah, that's a coral that's no one really seems to talk about much anymore. But it is a great coral. When I see that, I ask the owner about it. They can name it. I'm like, okay, this person really is into their tank. That's really cool. Now, what about size of corals? Again, this is soft corals. This is hard corals. This is LPS as well. As I said a minute ago, I'm more impressed with a reef tank that started from frags or even mini colonies, multi-branch type of frags, not just the twig. Then it has grown out. To me, that shows patience and it shows the willingness to play the game, to play the long game when it comes to their tank. This is what I call the fun phase of a saltwater tank. Now, let's take a moment to take this in. There's soft corals in here, there's hard corals, LPS, SPS. This is a really true mixed reef as an example. So if you're a softy person, I'm still talking to you. Why do I say this is the fun stage of a tank? Because everything is growing. Like you've got encrusting going on, some of these torts, and everything is starting to put out multi-branches. The Gonopora over there towards the lower right, they're happy. We've got great polyp extension. Everything's got its place. You can look at this and go, okay, this person didn't buy these corals at this size and just put them in their tank because they look like they should be there. They're starting to grow different directions because of the water movement in the tank. and how the tank is laid out. They're encrusting. This person bought them as frags, and they're letting them grow. It also looks like, a nice garden. Everything looks really nice. It doesn't look overgrown. Now, some of us look at this and go, well, that person's right on the way. Can't wait to see this tank when it's fully stuffed. And this tank became fully stuffed. When I looked at it, I said, look, it's still a really good reef tank to me, but when it's overgrown and touches stuff to stuff touching one another, the fish really don't have much places to swim. It's like, I can still appreciate the owner did what it did to have to get to this point. They had that much success. They followed the path that long. And I'm like, I kind of like it at this phase, what you're looking at here. Everything's got its place. It's starting to come into itself. Corals have their personality, not just big and weedy. So having a tank that can be maintained like this, that's showing a different piece of dedication to me. I don't want to say a grown out reef tank, whether it be LPS, SPS, or even a mixed reef, isn't in that 1%. I'm just going to kick it up maybe into the upper 1% of the 1% when I see it trimmed as like a bonsai garden, as opposed to just letting it overgrow itself and get weedy and there's nowhere for the fish to go. Now, again, this is relative. This is a 200-gallon tank. Give your sense of scale. It's 6 feet across, 24 inches front to back, 30 inches tall. It's about 200 gallons. You put these corals in a 1,000-gallon tank, and they're going to look super, super small. So this is relative. If you have a 90-gallon tank and you put these corals in your tank, it's going to look stuffed from the get-go. So just keep in mind, this is relative to the size of the tank. Now, upper 1% of reef tanks, I have found that the owners know very well about leaving it alone. They look at their tank and they don't touch it. Now, you may be saying, wait a minute, you were just talking to me a minute ago about fragging stuff down, trimming your bonsai garden. Yes, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about fiddleitis. Thing, it's like, they just have to touch it. They don't just touch the stand and like, oh, I touched it. No, I'm talking about like, they got to get in the tank. Something's got to get cleaned. Something's got to get touched. They have to get their hand in the tank. Somehow, every day or every other day, the tank gets messed with. You kind of look at it like this. You're like, ooh, shiny object. Must touch. When I walk into a system, a lot of times if the tank isn't doing well and it's got some age on it, I can start listening to the owner. I can start looking at the system. If it looks as spotless as it did, likely the day it was installed, it's a giveaway to me that they're fiddling too much with it. I found a really great reef tanks. The owners respect it. They will get in there and frag if they need to, but they're not in there every day fragging. Like, Sunday's my frag day. They're going to make the frags they need to make. And then they're going to get out of there. They're going to step back and let the tank run. I'm a big believer on letting the tank tell you what it wants. Every tank has a personality. Once you dial into that personality, you know what works for that tank. Then you just let it do its thing. We hear a lot about ideal water perimeters, and it has to look like this, it has to look like that. I found when people start to go chase those things, then they get into the fiddleitis mode because they're trying to get into this box and making the tank fit into this box, as opposed to saying, tank, you tell me what you want. I know you have to be salty and you got to be warm and got to have lights and flow, etc. And from there, I'm going to figure out, once I know it works, I'm just going to give you what you need, give you gentle pushes, and leave you alone. Now, I understand when you have a beautiful saltwater tank, you want to fiddle with it. I'm saying spend more time fiddling with it in your mind, enjoying what you're seeing. Keep your hands out of it. Let it get a little dirty. Let it do its thing. Don't go fiddle with the thing. All right. Also, how does the tank present in the room? And again, this is relative. You may like the idea of having a big saltwater tank. So when you walk into the room, people are like, whoa, that's a big tank. Or you may be into having a small saltwater tank in the corner or in the middle of a wall, and it has its place. It's fun to enjoy, and it doesn't get any more than that, which is okay too. If you're a nano-type person, don't think you have to have a large tank to have an upper 1%, that great reef tank. You can have a small nano tank with its own personality that's been thought through with fitting fish and still have it be great. However, let's look at a couple examples and I'll talk to you more about what I mean. To me, a great reef tank invites you in. And there's somewhere to look at it, stand and look at it, and there's somewhere to sit. I've personally never stood and stared at something for more than 15 minutes, 30 minutes max, certainly not an hour before I wanted to sit, relax, and start to take it in. We don't go to movies and stand up and watch movies. You go and you sit. Well, yeah, movies, those things that we can't do anymore. So there's a place to stand, there's a place to sit, and this tank draws you in. For example, this tank's in a room, there's a television right next to it. Some people are going to say, well, the couch is facing the wrong way. Okay, well, that's up to you. However, you can look at the tank, you can represent yourself when you watch TV. This tank is complementing the house, it draws you in. This is a little different. This is an in-wall tank. Okay, those of you that didn't like the fact that the couch wasn't facing the tank, the chairs are facing the tank. There's no TV to be seen. Again, it's drawing you in. You can stand up, get close and look at it. You can sit back. This tank looks like it was built as part of the house. In reality, it was added on later. Also, tanks are a gathering point, I found. Without fail, whether you have a fish tank, fish only live rock tank, or a reef tank, when you get it up, you get it rolling, people come to that tank and they enjoy it and they look at it. I'll just tell you a funny story in a minute about that, but here's a great example. This client likes to cook, they like to entertain, they can sit at the table, entertain their guests. Their guests are very likely going to be distracted by the tank. The owner's partner was a little bit annoyed with this tank because the partner wanted everyone to congregate to the kitchen, but they were always just drawn over to the reef tank. They hung out by the tank as opposed to kind of congregating in the kitchen. So this tank complements the space. It presents well, and it's more of those, here's the tank, you can be over here, it doesn't overpower the room, it's part of the room. The tank draws you in. Again, another place here. This tank is in the gathering space. This is right at the dining room table. There's a single sitting chair there with a light. This owner can read, take in the tank, or they can sit at the kitchen table. They can actually look at the tank from their kitchen on the other side as well. It is part of their life. It is making a presentation. It's drawing you in. You have different options on how you want to take in the tank. Now, then there are tanks that make a bigger statement. This tank, to give you a sense of scale, 6 feet long, 4 feet tall, 3 feet front to back, built in a game room in a kind of an older type of feel type of house, heavy wood molding around. However, this owner, every night he comes home, he works late, usually works till about 9 or 10 o'clock. He likes to come home, sit right here in this armchair, watch the news right next to his reef tank. It's drawing him in. You might say, wait, why is he looking at the news, especially nowadays, when you got this reef tank right here? Because he can shift and look at the reef, or you can shift and watch the news. This tank is drawing you in. I am told that in this room, there is a pricey painting. When they have a party, the reef tank gets all the attention. No one notices the painting. So there, if you want to make a statement, forget the art, put the money in your reef tank. Now, we talked about dimensions here. Some of you are going to be taken out by the fact that we're talking about larger tanks. Here's a 90-gallon tank up on the landing of a second story of a house, again, drawing you in. Every time you walk up the stairs, go into one of these rooms, you're right by the tank, you're probably going to stop and take it in. This is a 90-gallon system. It doesn't have to be big for it to hit that upper echelons of tanks. At the end of the day, the tank is drawing you in. You want to observe it. You want to be a part of it. You're going to have a place to stand and observe like this one. You're going to have a place to sit. And I will also say that that tank is in a place where the owner doesn't have to steal away to go to the tank. I've experienced this personally with my tank. My tank is on the second story of the house because that's the only place to have a tank the size that I want. And every time I want to sit and observe the tank or stand and observe the tank, at the family's downstairs where we tend to spend a lot of our time, I have to steal away, leave the family, and go upstairs and observe it. Now I've changed that by adding on to the house and getting a bigger reef tank and making the space upstairs bigger so that we family can now congregate up there and do game nights, movie night, things like that. But I found really great reef tanks are in a place where the owner can enjoy the tank without having to steal away and leave the main part of their life. This tank is right in the middle of the main living area of the house. They can stand, they can sit in their kitchen, they can sit at their dining room table. whenever they go to the garage, which is just over there to the left, it's right there. The tank is an extension of the owner's life, not only where it is in their house, how it was thought through, how they run it, and ultimately the livestock in it reflects on the owner's character. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the owner is that upper 1% of people. That 1% is super rich. You don't have to spend tons of money to have a great looking saltwater tank. What's free is your commitment, your time, putting that commitment to your tank, to having something great. And you don't have to spend money on that. You can do that on a budget and still have a knockout tank. In the end, though, that tank is an extension of you and your life, what you're trying to do, and it reflects on your character and how it looks within it. So with that, I wish you all luck with your tanks. I hope you're getting to that upper echelon, looking at how you can get your tank from good up there to great. Good luck on the journey. Skipper, hold your course. Sometimes there's ups, sometimes there's downs. At the end of the day, we got into this hobby to have fun. So take a moment, breathe, sit back or stand, and enjoy your tank. All right.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was a great talk. If you want to ask Mark some questions, go to macna.org/questions. Right after this talk, we'll have that question and answer session. So go ahead, take a moment. Don't close the stream, but go to macna.org/questions. Ask your question to Mark as well as the other speakers from today, and we'll do a live Q&A soon. Mark, thank you for joining us here today on MACNA 2020 Phoenix Rising.
Thank you for hosting this, Kevin. It was a pleasure to be here.